Hi everybody, welcome to the Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies channel. My name is Jake and you are watching our new teacher series that is being created to help new teachers and all teachers get started with the school year. If you are new and just jumping into this thing, there is a link below this fancy little video screen that you're watching here that you can click on for a free checklist to the new teacher series, which we highly recommend. While you're here, if you want to hit that like and subscribe button below, that would be swell. You will not regret it. Well, I don't know if you will or not. That's all up to you and your own feelings. But anyway, this video is going to be all about using Google Classroom. So if you are a Google Classroom school, then you're going to want to watch this because it's going to hopefully make your life a lot easier. We're going to divide this thing up into two parts. The first half of it, I'm going to show you one of my Google Classrooms so we can take a look at what a finished product looks like and how it's organized, and I can give you some tips and tricks as far as how I set mine up and some of the reasons behind it. And then the second part, we're going to create a brand new Google Classroom so you can actually see how to set this thing up and what that looks like step by step. So without further ado, I'm going to shift over to screen share so you guys can see my screen and we can walk through these steps together. Okay, so now I am on one of my past Google Classrooms. This was one of my classrooms that I used during the 2020-2021 school year. So if you're watching this way in the future, there might be some different features on here than what I'm showing you right now. But this is going to at least cover us through the basics of what a finished Google Classroom would look like. So at the top, you can see the name of the class. Now there's different ways, obviously, you can go about naming this. For me, I used my name. The 9 was the period number, period 9, class period 9. And then world history was this particular class. There also is a subtitle that you can use to label your classes if for some reason you have cohorts like the school I was working for at the time did, or some other subtitles you want to put in there. Maybe the room number your class is in, maybe you're including the grade level somewhere if you have multiple grade levels that you teach. This class code is going to be really important later when we set up our Google Classroom. This class is archived, so don't try putting in this code entering my class here. You won't be able to get in, but this is what's going to be needed for your students in order to get into your classes when you're actually getting them set up when you're back at school. So we're going to come back to this in a little bit. Now you're going to notice at the top of the screen, we've got 4 different tabs up there, at least as of 2020, 2021. So you've got the stream, classwork, people, and grades. Now, for these here, I'm not going to actually click on people and grades just because I'm not going to show names of past students or any private information of that sort. But the people over here, you're going to have a list of your students as well as any co-teachers that you may have in your classroom. And I'll show you how to set this up when we get to the second part of our video here. But that's going to be your one-stop shop to see who is all members of your class. And you can send mass emails through there to people and such. And then grades, if you use Google Classroom also as your grading system, then you're going to make use of this particular section as well. Personally, the school that I worked at, we used PowerSchool, so I really didn't make use of this in particular as far as like for a total grading system. But you can see all of the assignments there. You can see all of your students there and the scores that you gave them through Google Classroom. So that's more so what this section is. The two that I am going to actually show you are going to be stream and classwork. Now the way that I had my stream set up is I really more so just used it as a place to give overall announcements. So this past school year, this was the big year of distance learning with COVID-19. So I have several announcements in here really more so about, hey, if I had to be absent a certain day when we were back with like hybrid learning, especially for my students who were at home that day, how they were able to, get their attendance for the day and whatnot. But I also used it for just general notes like, hey, these are the assignments that need to be turned in if they're not already for the end of this is our India unit, ancient India unit over here, and ancient Egypt you can see over in this area. And I labeled the different assignments and such. And I also could put just general announcements from the school here if there was something that our principal or instructional specialist or one of the higher ups wanted me to send out through Google Classroom. I would generally communicate it through here as well. So this was just like the big picture overall kind of stuff. You can also have your assignments display through here, as I'm going to show you in a little bit. But in order to keep things a lot simpler for the students, I chose to not have it show up in my stream. At least about halfway through the year, I changed it because it got a little funky. Now, classwork is probably the area that your students are going to spend the most time at, okay? And this is probably also the part that you need to spend the most time thinking about when organizing your Google Classroom, because this is really gonna set up how easy or difficult it's going to be for your students to use it, how user-friendly it's gonna be. So there's no one right or wrong way to set up Google Classroom, but this is what I used, so I'm going to show you what I did to just give you some ideas as to how you might set up yours. So one thing that I would highly recommend doing with your classwork is definitely divide it into sections. Otherwise, everything is going to come up in one big giant list, and if you're a brand new teacher, that's going to be frustrating not only for your students to sort through, but also for you to sort through as well. Now, some of these sections might not really be applicable to you at this point. Again, this was a Google Classroom that I used during distance learning. So we had our class Zoom links all at the top here, so it was really easy for our students to get into our Zoom sessions, either when we were fully on Zoom or when we were hybrid and needed to communicate with part of the class on Zoom. I also had a warm-up early finisher activity section. If you do have a hybrid situation going on at any point, that is something definitely to consider. One thing I would highly recommend would be a resource page for the not assignments, I should say, but for the resources that your students are going to be coming back to again and again from the beginning to the end of the school year. So on my resource page, I made sure to have it as one of my top sections. If it was a year that wasn't involving distance learning and I didn't have to have these sections here, the resource page would be my top section. And what I included there were resources ranging from calendars and schedules, which we had to adjust throughout the year. Hopefully you can just have one. We had a PowerSchool as our grading system, so whatever your grading platform is, if you use something outside of Google Classroom, I would advise making a link to it here so that way your students can easily access it to check their grades. Classroom syllabus is always a good, handy resource to have on your resource page so it's accessible throughout the year. I left a Get to Know You Google form in our Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies store. We call it our student inventory. This is a resource that Sarah and I both used with our classes to just gather basic information about all of our students. Most of your students would fill it out at the beginning of the year, but I like to leave this up throughout the year. So when I got any new students throughout the course of the year, I would ask them to fill out the Get to Know You Google form so I could get a better idea of who they were, their interests, their hobbies, just like all of my other students. Just because they're coming to me later in the year doesn't make that step any less important. So I like to keep that up there as a reference for them to do that first day that I had them in my class, or first couple days. I also linked our textbook information under the resource page as well. Now, I might have went a little overboard on this, but I'd highly recommend it. I made a post for both the online textbook website itself, and then I also made PDF copies, PDF files of everything in the online textbook as well. Now, I'm not kidding you here. We did not go through 24 modules. That is insane to go through that much, personally, in my opinion. If you do that, though, hats off to you. I am in awe of how you make it happen. But I just, for consistency's sake, I put up the entire textbook here in PDF format so it matched up with the entire online one. That way, if the online one wasn't working, if it was glitchy, if there were some problems, students could still access the PDF version as well to have as a reference to use for an assignment, whatever the case might be. So I'd highly recommend setting that up on your resource page as well. All right, it definitely saved me several times, by saving my students several times if they had some tech issues that were at play. So those are just some ideas of what you could put in that resource page area. And also, like I was saying, if you would like a student inventory resource, if you would like a classroom syllabus resource that is a template that you can just plug in your information to, you can check out the Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies store, and you can get those resources with minimal prep ready to go. All you have to do is plug in your information, your school's information, and voila, it is ready to go. All right, now the last part of this, I'm gonna scroll back up to the topics section here, were the actual units. Now I would recommend, there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could either just have your current unit up so that way your students are not seeing everything, or you can have it to where all of your units are showing up. I preferred to do it that way because, at least in the school that I worked at, we still allowed students to go back and complete or work on assignments from a previous unit, or in particular, if you have a student who was absent for a good chunk of time and you moved on to a current unit and they still need to finish up that previous unit, definitely useful for them to still have access to that. So I did mine in reverse order, where I had my most recent unit showing up at the top and the older units showing up at the bottom. Less scrolling for the students, so it was more user-friendly. Also a lot easier for their parents if they were looking at this with them, or a teacher from another class, so they're not having to scroll through all the information if they're helping them try to find a particular assignment during like a study hall period or such. So taking a look at this, let's look at the Unit 8 here, Ancient Greece. As you can see, our Rome unit, we kind of ran out of time at the end of the year. There wasn't much there. So I'm going to take a look at the Greece unit. And so with this here, as you can see, the way that I organized mine, I was adding days and dates to the titles of every single post that I did on Google Classroom. This makes it a lot easier for your students. It also makes it a lot easier for their parents and guardians. Again, if another teacher is trying to help out a particular student in like a study hall, advisory, academic extension kind of situation, also helps you trying to help your student, trying to find an assignment if they didn't get it done, if it's missing or late, or whatever the case might be. Pro tip, I would highly recommend titling things in your Google Classroom the exact same way that you would title them in your grading system, whether it's PowerSchool, Skyward, just to keep everything consistent and make the user experience easier for everybody involved. And so that way people aren't searching all over the place to try to find an assignment and to match things up like you're Sherlock Holmes or something. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to anybody. So we're going to take a look at this post I did from May 17th for the Greek mythology Instagram. And I'm going to show you how I organized this as an example assignment to make it easy for the students to use. So I tried to make this as user-friendly for the students as well as their parents and guardians or other teachers by putting this in a step-by-step instructional layout, referring to the assignments that were attached to this. So this particular assignment, there were multiple attachments that were on this thing. So the first step, I said, hey, watch the Greek gods rap video about the Olympians and the major Greek gods. And you can see that that was attached over here. Then I said to click on the Greek mythology slideshow, which contained information on the Greek gods over here. Then I said, after you look at the slideshow, let's open up the notes on your Google Doc. So that way then you can complete the notes using the slideshow. This was an activity that was partially independent since I had half of my kids that were there completing this at the time, and half of my kids who were maybe at home or quarantining or whatever the case might be. And then the final step, complete the Greek mythology Instagram assignment, which is over here in the Your Work box, and have them use the information from slide 1 on these directions and start working on the assignment. So I assigned this on a Monday. I said this was due on a Wednesday. I bolded it. I clearly identified it as homework. I also made sure to put the due date up here in the upper right-hand corner through Google Classroom, which I'm going to show you how to do that as well in the second part of the video. So again, just trying to make this as user-friendly as possible. And then in my grading system, I also titled it the same thing, Greek mythology Instagram. So that way, when I did grade this and I put that on our PowerSchool or whatever grading system that you are using, students and their parents and guardians could easily match that up with the assignment on Google Classroom. So there wasn't any guesswork as to what that particular assignment was. And then over here, you can see, looks like I had a student who might have turned this in after the deadline, someone who never did it in the first place. It shows up that it was assigned, and then the 24 other students in the class who all had it graded and returned to them so that way they could see their scores. So that is just a play-by-play on an example assignment. Well, an assignment that I actually used with the kids, but an example assignment here on Google Classroom. And then you can see we could go all the way back to the beginning of the year. And then back here, I wasn't dating anything for dates here, so that was something I picked up on later in the school year. So that is the brief tour of a finished Google Classroom. And for the next phase of the video, I'm going to show you how to build a Google Classroom from scratch. Okay, so now that you've seen an example Google Classroom, I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to set up your own Google Classrooms and also some tips and tricks to help you set it up in the most efficient way possible for you and for your students. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is on your Google account, you're going to need to hit the little waffle button in the upper right-hand corner to get to your Google Apps. So I'm already here, but what you're going to need to do is find the classroom icon and click on that so that way you can get to the home page for Google Classroom. Now, if you are a first-year teacher or if you are working in a new building this year or a new school district this year, your screen is going to be blank. There's going to be this message that says, you don't have any classes. Create your first class or something of that effect in the middle of the screen here. So I already have an example classroom set up because we're going to use this for something I'm going to show you later. But when you want to create a new class, you are going to click on the plus sign that says create or join a class when you put your cursor over it. And we're going to click create class. Now for your students, if they are trying to enter one of your existing classes, they're going to click join class, but we want to create the class here. Now this message here, since I'm using a personal account, is coming up. This should not be a problem for you if you are making this through your school. So first I'm going to need a class name. So I'm going to title this class. Let's make this, I got a US one, so let's make this world history here. And then the other three things are options here. So I always like to put down the section. I would put the class period here because this helps me differentiate all of my different class periods. So I already have period 1 over there. So I'm going to make this period 2. Now you could put the subject in here if you wanted to, make it more official. You could type in a room number here. I don't personally find that necessary. So I'm just going to leave it with the class name and the section, and then I am going to create this thing. Perfect. All right, so it just created this new classroom for me. Now I want to go back to that previous screen here. And actually, if you want to go back to your home page for your Google Classroom, click on these horizontal lines in the upper left-hand corner, and then you can click on the class button, and then that will take you back to your home screen. Now, when you're making your classes, the most recent classroom that you made is going to show up as your class on the most toward the left side. But me, I like everything to be in order. I want this to show up after my first period class because this is my second period. So if I click and hold this, I can drag it over. So that way my US history class for period 1 still shows up first and my world history class for period 2 shows up second. Okay. So let's go into the US history class because I have a couple of things that are set up there already. So the first thing that you're going to want to do, this is not the part that's set up already. That's going to be the people part and the grades I'm going to show you a little bit later. But you've got your class code that's going to be showing up in this particular area. Now this is what you could display big on your smart board or on your screen with your projector, whatever equipment you've got in your classroom. So it's very easy for your students to all enter themselves into the Google Classroom the first day that you are going to be using it with them. So one tip that Sarah used with her classes is she actually would print out the Google Classroom codes and she would put them on her board. So whenever she had either a new student join her class who moved into the district, or if a student switched from one class period to another, first-year teachers, that is going to happen more than you think if you're teaching middle school, high school in those first few weeks. So it's just a nice way to make it easier for yourself as well as for the student who is entering your class or switching classes to get to where they need to be. So that's a helpful tip from Mrs. Social Studies there. Okay, so that's the class code. Now, when you first make this, Google Classroom, as you might have noticed when I made the world history one, it gave you an automatic theme based on the name that you chose for your classroom. But you can hit select theme and you have a wide variety of themes that you can choose from that should fit whatever it is that you're teaching. So as a social studies teacher, I would stick with the history section here. But you might have noticed this came up when we made that world history classroom. We've got the US one here. There's a geography one, a general social studies one, world studies one. So there's a lot of cool options. Or if you want to pick your own photo, then you can click the upload photo button here to get something from your computer if you prefer to go that route. Okay, so that's some of the basic decor stuff. Last thing I will say on that though, going back to the main screen, I preferred to use just the options that they gave me here, and I would more so make all of the classes the same thing. So I was pretty much always teaching 6th grade world history, so all of my backgrounds would look the same. Now the reason I did this was actually more so for the co-teachers or other support staff or whoever else faculty-wise needed to be in my Google Classroom, because they would have a lot more than 5 or 6 classes on their screen. So I wanted to do my part to color code things so that way it was much easier for them to get to wherever it is that they needed on their end. So you can help out your fellow staff members by keeping all of your classes of the same subject, the same background. You should only have 5 or 6, so that should make it easy. Okay, that last thing about that, let me go back into the classroom here. Now, before you set up anything on Google Classroom, before we get into any of these tabs up here, communicating with your class, there are a few tips I have for you that I learned the hard way, or some fellow coworkers I had over the years learned the hard way by not doing at the beginning of the year. So I don't want that to happen to you. So I'm going to show you some important things that you want to consider before the first day that you use these with your students, before you even give them access. So in the upper right-hand corner, there is a little gear here that we are going to click on that is going to take us to our class settings. Now, if you ever decide that you need to change anything from the class details that we initially set up, there's also a little class description option it looks like it gives you here. Again, you don't have to have that, but you could always modify that. The general information that comes up next, personally, I really didn't do anything with the invite code stuff over here. I just kind of left it as it was. You can probably ignore that. Now this first place here though is something you definitely want to check out. Now in the previous part of the video, I was mentioning the difference between how I used Stream and how I use Classwork, those tabs that you saw earlier. And I wish I could say that I knew this from the beginning, but it actually wasn't until my most recent year in the classroom that I actually converted things to make it a little bit easier this way. Google Classroom defaults to where everything that you post, regardless if it's a general announcement, regardless if it's an assignment that students have to complete, it will post everything automatically onto your stream. Now, the problem that this can have for students is that they will come to fully rely on the stream because everything shows up here. They will never even bother going to Classwork. And while they can get away with doing that, your students who are your more disorganized people, heck, even your organized people, they are going to be rummaging through all kinds of stuff that's going to be organized in no rhyme or reason other than whatever is the most recent information that is on top, which is fine if you are just starting off the school year. But what happens if you have a test that is happening at the end of September, but they need to scroll back all the way to the beginning of September to find a resource to go back and use to study? That's going to get really cumbersome real quick. So what you're going to want to do, my advice at least, is when you get to this section here where it says classwork on the stream, and just notice I skipped this part. I'm going to come back to this in a second, the part that says stream. But classwork on the stream, I would change it to just hide notifications. Because then what this is going to do is that anything that shows up under classwork, I'm going to go back over here. Hang on, I need to save my changes. Always save, that's another tip. So now anything that I'm going to assign over here on classwork is not going to appear here on the stream. The stream is just exclusively going to be for general types of classroom announcements. This way, students aren't going to be rummaging through all of their classwork on this disorganized stream, and you can organize it a lot better in classwork, like you saw in the previous classroom that I showed you. And we'll show you how to set that up in a moment. All right, let's go back to the gear here. So I've hid notifications on the screen. The other thing that you are going to want to do, or at least consider, is with your stream, how much comment access you are going to give to your students. I would highly, highly, highly recommend changing this to only teachers can post or comment. Now you might be thinking, but Jake, I want my students to be engaging with each other. I want them to be commenting on my posts. I want to have this big, awesome collaborative community. I heard that was awesome in college. Yes, that is awesome. But the reality of the situation is, and this has happened both to myself and other teachers that I've known, especially when you are starting off, your kids are good at technology. And while a lot of them will use and harness the power of technology for good, some will get tempted to do some other not so good things every once in a while, and may use your Google Classroom to be an epic chat board where they will have conversations with other people in your class after hours. And I guarantee they won't be about class. Or they could be about making fun of another student. True story, that was something that happened at a school that I worked at where a teacher had forgotten to turn this setting off, and a student actually framed another student using their account that they hadn't logged off of on their laptop and then posted some really bad stuff on there. It wasn't good. The person who did it ultimately faced responsibility and was caught, but don't put yourself, don't put your students, don't put anybody through that. Put it to only teachers can post or comment. If you ever have an assignment where you want students to be engaging and commenting on each other's stuff, then during that day, you can switch it to student can only comment if it's something that they're commenting off of yours, or students can post or comment. And then after that school day ends, change it back to the only teacher can post or comment. I know that's a long tangent, but especially as a first year, it's something that you probably don't know. I don't want you to run into that particular issue. Save the headache for everybody involved. You got enough stuff to worry about at the start of the year. Okay, show deleted items. I just leave that off. You want your students seeing stuff that you deleted. That just doesn't make any sense. Now the grading, I'm going to be honest with you, I've graded things on Google Classroom to send back out to students to show them their scores on stuff, particularly in the 2020-2021 school year with distance learning. But I didn't actually grade things like show students their overall grades on Classroom. Chances are you might be using another grading system, or maybe you're lucky and have it integrated with your Google Classroom. If so, you are on a whole other technological universe and plane than I ever got to be on. But if you are interested in setting this up on here, overall grade calculation, I just set it to no overall grade because I didn't use it, but you have the option to set it to total points. You can have it weighted by category. You could show your overall grade to students. You can add grade categories over here. Maybe you want to make your test, I don't know, 50%. Whatever the case might be, again, I'll be honest with you, I did not use this particular section. I'm sure that if that is something that your school is wanting you to do, they will tell you in the orientation to all have you set it up the same way. At least hopefully they do. Consistency definitely is also key on the Google Classroom experience. Okay, so that's the general info. Let's save that. Let's get out of here. Let's move on. Okay, so we took care of this area. Nope, we did not. We have to communicate with our class here. Okay, so let's say that we wanted to communicate something with your class. Maybe you want to, I don't know, say hello to your students at the beginning of the year. All right, you have the ability to choose if, let's say you had multiple US history classes, you would click on all of these so that way you could post the same thing to everybody, and then you don't have to copy the same thing over and over again. But since in my little example world here, my world history class, well, no, it's the beginning of the year. They need the same message. All right, so I'm gonna click both of them. I'm gonna have all of my students be included, and I'm gonna say hello, welcome to my super awesome class. I would use more professional discretion if you were actually doing this, but you know what? Why not? Okay, doesn't hurt. Sarah Satani. So I'm using Sarah's account here. Her name's on the Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies account. We might have to have a chat after this. But so Sarah is the teacher of this account here. Okay. So now we're going to go to, and then here at class comment, Sarah could comment on things here. She could tag people here if she really wanted to get creative. This more so would only be relevant if you were letting your students comment on things. But again, I already went in my spiel, my thoughts at least on the beginning of the year. Okay, let's go to classwork. So this is where you're probably going to be spending a bulk of your time. So when you're setting up your Google Classroom, you want to make this as organized as possible for, like I said in the previous section, your students, for their parents, I don't know how to say parents, for their parents and guardians who are inevitably going to be looking at your Google Classroom and also needing to figure out when so-and-so didn't turn in their assignment, like where is it and what is it and all that stuff. And also your coworkers, whether it's other teachers who are helping out that student who is completely disorganized in their advisory or study hall, whether it is a support staff member, whoever else it might be, all right, who's in your classroom. Okay, so let's create something just to see how this works. So the first thing that I would recommend actually would be creating some topics. These were those sections that you saw on my Google Classroom that I had used on the left-hand side. So if I were setting this thing up, probably the two that I'm going to have at the start of the year, I'm going to have the resource page. And this is going to be my one-stop shop where I am going to put those essentials that students are going to use throughout the entire year. And then let's just say, I don't know, I'm going to use, what is this, a U.S. history class? So I'm going to say Unit 1. All right, so let's start on early American cultures. Maybe you're starting with the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incans, showing that indigenous presence that started off our history since early human migrations. Okay, so we've got that going on here. So now I'm going to, if I want to flip the order of this, I can click the ... and I can move this up. If I want my resource page at the top, I can also click and drag it and swap it that way. Google Classroom has really stepped it up over recent years, I should say, and given you a lot of flexibility, increasing options on how to set this thing up, make it a better user experience for you. Okay, so resource page is now at the top. You have the option when you're creating something, you can either create an assignment or a quiz assignment, which whenever I was making a quiz, I just made it an assignment and then called it a quiz, but you have the ability to do what you will. You could post a question if you were wanting to use that option I was telling you about earlier, where students will just reply in a thread to your question and to each other. You can post a material, which could be a classroom schedule. It could be a calendar of what's going on in your class for the current month. It could be those textbook PDF files I was showing you in the previous part of the video, or the online textbook link. So anything that's not an assignment but is a useful resource, aka the resource page, would be where the material would be. You could reuse a post from another class if you didn't already set it up that way. So there's a lot of options here. So under the resource page, I'm going to click material, and I'm going to put up I don't know, let's put up our syllabus. That's pretty important, right? And I should definitely say that we definitely have in the Mr. and Mrs. Social Studies store a syllabus template that is already made, ready to go for you to plug in your information, because syllabuses are not fun to make, so we want to save you time on that. So check that out if that's something that you're interested in. All right, so syllabus, I titled that there. Description, you could type in something here if you wanted to. I'm going to leave it blank for our purposes. I'm going to put it in for our topic, the resource page, and I'm going to keep it in the U.S. history section. Actually, if I had a syllabus, I'm going to keep it the same for both classes. I'm going to put it in the world history section as well. I want all my students to see that. And then I am going to post it. Voila, now we've got our syllabus, and they can even click on it. If I had a description here, it would be over here for the kids to see. And then if you want to make an assignment, so under my early American cultures section there, So let's say that I am going to make the assignment. I click on assignment. Now this is where I was recommending to you that it's very important to put the day of the assignment. So when am I filming this thing here? It's not Monday. What is it? Wednesday? Today's Tuesday. I don't even know what day it is. Let's just go with Monday to keep it simple. Let's just say Monday, September 1st is the date. And actually to save space, I would always just do the numeric abbreviation. Just because on the student's Google Classroom, it'll cut off the title, so you want to try to get as much of that in there as possible on the general screen. So let's just say I'm going to have the student inventory. I know it's not an early American cultures assignment, but let's just say that I post that under that first unit for the students to see. Let's just pretend. So now I'm going to change the point value on this. I'm going to say it's going to be worth 10 points. Due date. Let's just say I'm going to give them, clearly it's, the first is a Wednesday, so I'm actually change that. You will be a lot better as far as organizing your stuff than I am, I'm sure, in knowing your days. All right, so let's just say, let's make this due on, let's be generous, beginning of the year. Let's give them till the 3rd. And if you want to give them a end of the day due time, I don't know, let's just say 3 o'clock. Why not? So they've got till Friday the 3rd at 3 o'clock in September to get this done. I'm going to put this under Unit 1 so it shows up there. I'm going to give some instructions. Let's say complete the... And I always like to use quote marks for my assignment here, but you can obviously do you. Complete the student inventory in your work box. Okay. And then I'm going to say homework, student, wow, I have caps lock on. Student inventory due on Friday, September 3rd. And Google Classroom recently did this. This was a pain before, but you can now bold and underline and italicize stuff in your post, which is very, very handy. Doesn't look like you can change the font sizes on anything. Hopefully that's an update that happens, or I'm just blissfully unaware of it. But I've got that set up. Now you're probably going to want to attach the assignment, so you would hit add over here if you got the assignment in your Google Drive. You can also attach if you had a video link, YouTube, whatever it is that you're wanting to put on there. You can attach that over there. And I don't know, let's just assign this thing. I think it's ready to go. You would obviously have an assignment with it, and here it is. So they can click on it, they can see the date that you posted it, they can see when it's due, which is also up here. You can see that both of the students in my class have not done this so far. That is a shame, but I just posted it, so what the heck. And voila, you've got your assignment posted. And so when you post every new assignment, the newer assignments are going to be at the top. So it's going to be in reverse chronological order, which is helpful because the most recent stuff, ideally, is what students are going to be looking at in the moment, more so than the stuff that is earlier. So that's just a brief way to organize your Google Classroom there. So I would highly recommend, that's probably what you're going to be starting with, those two. And then if you have other important things, if you want to add like school announcements, if you don't want to put that under your resource page, whatever else it is that you need, this thing's obviously going to grow throughout the course of the year, your topic list. Google Calendar, Class Drive folder. Again, I'm going to be honest with you. I tried to make things as simple as possible, so I really didn't use this part all that often. But if you want to access your Google Calendar and see like when all of your assignment due dates are, I believe your students can see this on their end too. That's something you've got as well. Again, I really didn't use those too much there, but that's just me. Okay, now I'm going to show you these last two things at the top, since I didn't show you the people and grades in my class that I had. This one's fine because the students you can see are Sarah and myself. So you'll see your teacher, so yourself obviously, and then any co-teachers that you want to invite in this thing, or any other staff members that you want to give teacher access, instructional aides, SPED staff, instructional specialists, your principal. I don't know if your principal would want to be on this, but whoever it is that needs to be in here, you can add as many people as you need over there. And then students, You can manually add students in, but I would recommend just putting up your classroom code for everybody to see on your screen and then just having everybody enter themselves. It saves you time, it saves them time, and it's wonderful. We don't have this because I'm showing this option to you on a personal account, not a school account. But you'll also have the option over here on your end to not only email students, but also to email their parents. This is, I think, a setting, either you can do this or like a school administrator can do this, but can have parents invited into all of your school's Google Classrooms, because you'll all be linked up through there. And so you can communicate and send out email blasts to either your students, or especially I found this useful to parents and guardians. I would use this personally if I had a test coming up and I wanted parents to know that, or if I wanted parents to know, hey, this is the final date, last call, and I'm accepting all these missing assignments that your kids may or may not have for the particular unit that we're on, just so that way they can get that information if they're linked up in the Google Classroom. And that way you're not sending out and trying to figure out everybody's emails and putting that all together in a massive email list. Nobody's got time for that. So you can just easily take care of that through here. So strongly recommend your parents, your students' parents, to sign up for Google Classroom at the beginning of the year, either in your syllabus, back to school night, whatever the case might be, just so that way you can get them in on that email list on here. And then grades, again, I don't really have anything in here right now because this is just a made-up class, but there's me, there's Sarah, so your students will show up on the left-hand side if you're using this for grades. Now let's just say that, I don't know, let's pretend that Sarah, she did this assignment here. She's awesome. She got a 10 out of 10 on that syllabus. Me, I'm a little bit of a slacker. I got a 7, or why 6? That's not a grade. I got a 7 out of 10. I don't know. I didn't do half of it when I turned it in, or part of it. Okay. Now, when you actually are going in and grading these, you'll have the option to put in these scores, but you would see all of your students' scores over here. And that also reminds me then, let's say if you did want to grade this, let's actually grade this here. So if you're ready to grade your students' assignments, like let's say that these are turned in and that they're done, you can go in here, you can click on the assignment if there was something attached. So like if I had attached the assignment, student me and teacher me clicked on this here, I could see the assignment and then I could go ahead and grade it through that window. It's pretty self-explanatory when you see that one, but you can also then change scores over here and such. But we're really just trying to give you a basic lay of the land to get you started here for back to school. So that section also is something that you definitely want to know about too. So there's other options that you can use on Google Classroom, but those are the basics that you're going to need to really get yourself up for the start of the school year. And a lot of this is very intuitive, so you'll be able to pick up on more tips and tricks as you go along. So there you have it. That was the Google Classroom tutorial. Hopefully you found it useful. Again, if you want to continue watching our new teacher video series, make sure you like and subscribe so that way you can keep up with every new video that is published. Again, if you also want to use the new teacher checklist, that is free. You can't complain about free, right? That is down below in the link. Make sure you get a hold of that to make the start of your school year go as smoothly as possible. And we will see you next time. Bye.